right, guys, welcome. And I am super excited to have you guys join me today. I've been really looking forward to this podcast. As I said, I met Kenneth Nelson Jr. just about a week ago, and he was actually the guest of honor through Sean Hart's Elite Speaking Academy, teaching the art of storytelling. Kenneth Nelson Jr. is an award-winning filmmaker. He wrote, produced, and directed a movie called Sincerely Brenda, which I actually watched this week. And I tell you, you guys need to go to Amazon Prime and watch that with your wife or just by yourself. It is a phenomenal story. I mean, just huge. So welcome, Kenneth. I'm super excited to have you.
Jody, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm just happy to be here, and thank you for watching the film as well. You sent some messages to me as you were watching it, and I think you were going through and you were watching certain parts, and you would Facebook message me and talk to me about it. And so, I'm always just so grateful and humble when people watch the film and they have feedback. Not just it's not about saying oh, the film is great and this and that. It's really people give great feedback about the story and how it touched them and what it meant to them. And so that's just always just humbling for me. And I love that, man.
Well, let's talk about the story about Sincerely Brenda without giving it away. Basically, it is, a recovered alcoholic father trying to make a connection with his two boys that he's been estranged from for many years. And the event that's bringing them together is the death of their mother. And I love the story, the way you crafted the story. So let's talk about, because I actually had three uncles that were alcoholics, and I know the impact that ripples across children. So how did you come up with, the idea for your story and to really hone in on this real problem in some families?
Yeah. So I'll start off just growing up. I didn't experience my parents. My father and my father was in the home, and my mother was there as well, and neither one of them had any drinking problems. So I didn't experience that firsthand. But I did have an uncle and probably some other family members that I didn't know about that experienced alcoholism. But I did have an uncle that I knew that I was close with that struggled with alcoholism. But again, it wasn't firsthand. So, but the idea for the story came from I just grew up watching a lot of films, and I didn't notice a lot of Black men like my father, my some of my uncles that I was really close with. I didn't see them portrayed on screen. So there was a range of emotion. I saw sensitivity, and I saw anger, and I saw happiness and sadness, and I saw all these things, and I didn't see that on the screen. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to create a film where you saw a father and sons, even though they had a history, a checkered history with each other. There was still love there, and you saw three men on screen that were strong men but vulnerable, and they had to work through a lot of insecurities and vulnerabilities and anger, and come out on the other side of that. So I just wanted to see something authentic, and see men on screen like that I had in my life. So that's really where the initial idea came from. But the character Charles, who was the father, really actually started with Brenda. The movie is named, Sincerely Brenda, obviously. So the idea really started with the mom, and then it just really developed into a story about the father and the sons, and the mom's kind of impact that she had on her sons. Uh, but let me say this: so many times when there are things that are left unresolved with families. Sometimes someone may die and then you don't get to, have that closure. And so really this was like, what happens when you don't get that closure? And everybody's kind of left to to kind of close the loop themselves, or figure out things amongst themselves, and or so all these things happen when you come together, in a house, and it's all this past stuff that just gets dug up. And so I wanted to just see how that would play out in this storyline. So I mean, I'm kind of giving you a bunch of stuff
No,
at once.
oh no, and I love that you went to that point, because there was one point in the story where the father is really struggling because he's trying to reconnect with his boys. And
Mm-hmm.
he's talking to his really good friend that was a friend of his wife as well, Brenda. And she said, the good thing is you're both breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times we feel like that, everything that's led up to where we are today, that it's almost impossible to bridge that gap. And I know in particular the case with my cousin and her uncle, and he was, I mean, her dad, he was very abusive. He was an abusive alcoholic, right? And I remember one time talking to her, I was like, you know what, you really need to somehow bridge that gap between you and him, because if he passes away, you're going to be left with a hole in your heart,
Right.
because you never said what was on your heart. And she asked me the question, she said, Jody, why is it so important to you that I bridge that gap? And I'm like, I'm just telling you, if you don't bridge the gap, or at least try to offer the olive leaf, you will always regret that moment in your life. But it's hard when you've been filled with so much pain from somebody that's supposed to have loved you and been there for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's hard too, because a lot of times, like with these characters in the film, I'll say with all of them to a certain degree, you that olive branch, like you make it about, how do I say this? So you make it about yourself, in the sense you're afraid to extend this olive branch because you may not receive something in return. And you're supposed to do it, like, the forgiveness is not really for, you can say it's not for the other person, but it's really for you. It's for you to heal. But all these characters, and what we do in life is we approach a situation and we want to hear a person apologize, or we want to hear this person just talk about what they did wrong, and go down this list of what they would have done, and maybe they may not be in that space. And so we walk away from it feeling like, well, now I'm even more angry than I was before. This person, how dare they? You hurt me so bad, and like you need to understand how much you hurt me, and you need to tell me that. And really, if they say that, does it really change anything? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if they say, I'm sorry, and I hurt you, I know I did, but you really, that it's more to it than that. And so I wanted to show that with this film, because if you I don't want to give too much away, but like the father, he was in AA, and he went through that program, and he found he developed a relationship with God to help him through it. But he was still like keeping his distance,
Yeah.
for many years. And he said, well, your mom told me to stay away. Well, okay, but you guys were kids then, and you were in jail, and then you come out, and I mean, they're grown men now.
Yeah.
And so you're still respecting that wish of your ex-wife, but knowing that, okay, your boys are grown, you need to develop a relationship with them. But he felt that it was better that he just stay away, because, everything would be great if I just stay away, and I'm going to pray for them, and I'm going to just make sure I stay sober. But it was still, as you saw in the film, there was still so much, anger there. And maybe not anger on his part, but just guilt. He had so much guilt still, in this weight and this heaviness. But all the characters had to face the past, and really truly forgive themselves, and then open themselves up to be able to, no matter what the person, they didn't forgive them or not, or say I'm sorry, they had to be okay with that. And that's what I wanted to explore as well in this film. But we get stuck with that, man. Like, I still, it's something that we have to work through. Like, I'll get upset and I want to hear it from someone else, because, hey, like, I'm justified in this anger, and you need to tell me, like, you're sorry, and you need to tell me and admit to everything that you've done wrong. so we can move past this. No, that's not how it works all the time.
No, it doesn't at all. In fact, I think a lot of times we as men, we have this internal guilt, and we want to bridge the gap, the gulf that we've created to our children. And a lot of times we go there and we expect them to automatically go, it's okay, Dad, and I love you, and put my arms around you and everything's solved. But it doesn't allow the children or the wife or whoever you've hurt the space to come to their own healing. And that timing can be a real challenge in relationships, especially with their children. In fact, today I had a conversation with my nephew, and he said, hey, you know what? I just wanted to reach out to you because I've been talking to my dad, but I just don't feel like I'm getting the response. I'm not getting the connection that I really need. And I said, well, first of all, let me say this. I go, obviously your dad sees things very black and white, and that's where he is in his life. But you can't discount the foundation that he's given you. And so just like me, sometimes I can go and try to talk to my children, and they may put up the walls and say, Dad, I don't want to hear it. But if they go to you and talk to you about the same thing, you may say the exact same message, but the way that you come at it, or your personal experience, or your very delivery can make the difference into them receiving that message. And they've also, I think, because they've gone looking for somebody that can help them, not just their dad, but they found another man that they can look up to, they're able to find that strength that reinforces what their dad told them, or maybe even opens new sight to them that they hadn't considered before. And so they can grow and then create that connection with their dad indirectly.
That's going to be tough for me to do. I have a 2-year-old, and so I'm not quite there yet, but I'm just thinking about that, man. Like, I'm like, wow, that's going to be tough for me. Well, maybe not, but I think when you're trying to tell your kids something and they hear, we do it all the time. We hear from someone else, and all of a sudden, oh my God, that was profound. It's like, I've been telling you this for the last, couple of months. And what do you mean profound? Like, I've been saying this to you. And so that, this isn't quite related to that, but it made me think about my dad. Like, when I was young, I remember my dad was, he played all kinds of sports. Like, he played baseball, football, basketball, in high school. And I didn't really get that athletic gene. I was more artistic. And so I always kind of felt like, man, my dad probably was like, and my dad came to everything that I ever did, like every play, every show, anything. My dad was there. I just love him for that. Like, he never missed anything that I'd done and my sister done. And so, but I always still in the back of my mind, I was like, man, he probably wished I played, a sport. But I remember this one time, I was probably like 13 or something, and my friend lived across the street, and his stepdad was there or something, and my dad wanted to play catch with me. He's like, let's go outside and throw the football. And I'm like, I didn't want to. I'm like, I don't feel like it, Dad. And my friend came outside, and I was playing with him, and my friend's stepdad came outside and started throwing the ball with us. And then my dad actually saw us. He came outside and saw us, and it hurt him so bad. And I'd never forget that. I was like, and he kind of made a joke about it. Oh, I see you want to play with, you don't want to play with me. And so I just remember how he was really hurt about that. And so hearing you say that, I'm just thinking like, man, how I'm going to handle this as my son gets older. Right now I'm like his world, and his mom's his world, and have another guy like he may look up to, which is great when you have role models, because I may not be able to do whatever this guy can do, but that's gonna you're rough, man.
I tell you, it's an interesting. It's really an interesting experience, because especially with all of my kids, but I definitely see it with my girls. When they're young, I mean, you are their world, and then all of a sudden they turn 13, 14, and forget dad. Oh, dad, you're embarrassing me. Don't talk to me. What are you doing? You know, and I have a tendency to want to embarrass them anyway. So I kind of feed that. But then you have this gap, like 4 years, and then all of a sudden 18, 19, all of a sudden they start coming back around. They're going, you know what, I need dad in my life. And that's refreshing, right? Because I'm back into that phase.
Right.
And it's really fun. But, you know, I love that story that you shared, because I think a lot of times we as fathers think that, one, we need to be bulletproof, right? That there's no room for emotion, like in your dad's case of having his feelings hurt because you went and played with some other kid's dad, but left him on the side. And I mean, I've had that experience as well. But I also have to recognize and have the maturity, and it's hard to go, you know what, my son or my daughter needs that experience, even though it's not necessarily with me. And that's a humble pill to follow. And it's hard sometimes. There was also another thing in the movie that really hit me. And I think this is a universal thing with boys. And it's when Brenda's talking to the oldest son, and he got some bad news, and he's starting to cry in the car. And she says, "Stop those tears. It's time for you to be a man."
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that, because I think a lot of men have been told that when they were young boys, that they can't express their hurt, their anger, maybe anger. It's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to express vulnerability. It's not okay to express hurt emotionally.
Mm-hmm. That scene right there is very triggering for a lot of. We actually use that scene to advertise the movie on what we've been doing ads online and stuff, and that scene has triggered a lot of people. We have tens and tens of thousands of comments, well, not comments, but views, and hundreds of comments, and people are very, that scene brings up a lot of a lot of stories in the comment section, and some people say, I don't want to watch the entire film just because of that scene. But it's like, and it's triggering. If you're commenting, you don't even have to say you don't want to watch it. Like, it triggered something in you. And so I say that to say that scene is layered. Like, if you look at it from one layer, she's her husband, has just went away, and she's a single mom, 2 kids, and she knows how terrible that the place to take them to go visit their father in prison. It's not a place that she wants to take her boys. She's probably embarrassed about what her husband did. So there's a lot of things that you don't see and that she's dealing with. And for her son, he wants to see his dad, but she's like, no, he's a bad influence. It's a bad place. You're not going. And like, you need to be a man. You need to be grown out. You're like the oldest. So it's all that going on. And for him to it's not good. Like, he's trying to express himself and he's emotional in this moment. It's a big thing for him. Sometimes I think we may look at young people and say, they're young, they don't understand. And he was like 14 in that particular scene. So he was old enough to understand, but still, we can still sometimes make the mistake and say, oh, you're young, whatever, you'll get over it. But as you see, the movie shows you the impact that these moments has with these young kids. We see them as kids, then we see them as grown men, and they're still dealing with this trauma, and it's manifested in many different ways. So with this character you're talking about that was slapped, like, that one slap and her saying other things to him and be a man and like this and that, manifested in a sense. He grew up and he's like a perfectionist, and he's never happy, and he has to be the best, and he has to prove something to really everything that he's doing. He's successful in his job and everything, but he's introverted, he's unhappy, he's probably depressed, he's probably on his way to having a stroke, because he's keeping all this stuff in, and he's doing it all just to get like that good job honey from his mom. He doesn't have a relationship with his dad, but he was trying to develop a relationship with his dad. He actually, if you caught it in the film, he wrote letters to his father,
Yeah.
um, when he was away. So he tried to keep that relationship going with his dad behind his mom's back. So, but that scene is very layered. You could say, look at another layer and say, the mom was dealing with, actually, I talk about this in Q&As when we show the film. She was dealing with a little mental illness. So she had depression. Like, so she was dealing with, and the actress actually says she kind of suffered from maybe bipolar disorder, but that was like something that was just a character note, a character backstory. But so she's dealing with that, and then you have all these layers, man, that like it's not just she's a terrible person. I think that was what I wanted to say as well with this film, is that a lot of times we judge people based off of what we see, and we don't really consider their past. Like, how did they get to this place? And people aren't born bad, you're shaped by experiences and your environment and certain things, and like you make choices, but why, you know what I mean? And so that's what I wanted to explore with this film. So that's a very, very, very triggering scene. Usually when we show the film, like, it's a slow film, it's kind of slow, and it kind of just
Yeah.
builds up to this twist. But that moment happens about 20 minutes into the film or so, and as soon as that happens, people are like, oh my goodness. And then when she says what she says after, they're locked in. They're like, wait a minute, where is this going?
Yeah. I tell you, and I'm not going to tell the twist, but man, the twist threw me for a loop, man. It totally got me blindsided. I was like, wow, that was so powerful, because it really gave you some insight into the younger son and the challenges that he was going through. I just was like, oh my gosh, you got to watch it just for the twist. I mean, it
I
was
will
just,
give you a story about that twist. So when I was writing the script, I was having trouble with that character because he's angry. He's very angry. So I was like, why am I having trouble writing this character? I'm like, he just can't be angry just because his dad was, an alcoholic. I mean, it's you. Yes, he can be angry because of that. But I'm like, it just doesn't add up. And I didn't have that ending always. Uh, he was there with his dad in that moment, but the way it happened, I didn't write that before. And so I usually, I'll send my script out to a couple people that I trust and to give good feedback. And one of my friends, he read it and said, man, wouldn't it be like cool, like if actually he was in this spot instead of the other spot? And then that's all he said. And I'm like, oh my God. And I went back and rewrote the entire, like his character, I rewrote his entire character with that in mind, and it just transformed everything. And so his kid Michael is the most hated character in the beginning, and then he's the most loved character, at the end, because you're like, oh my God.
yeah. I just was like, and I love his quote, and I think this is universal. He said, I just wanted a dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think whether you have a very involved, engaged dad, or you have a dad that is absent because of work, or they're absent because of a divorce situation, or being addicted to alcohol or some other addiction, and you're not fully present, at the core, children just want to have that relationship, that connection, that meaning between their father and their mother. They're yearning for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really made me, I mean, just in this week, go, all right, what am I doing as a father to make sure that I am the dad that my children are hoping that I will be? And I often tell them, it's like, look, I am not the perfect dad, but I am trying to love you perfectly. And in the process of me making mistakes, I'm going to tell you I'm sorry. I'm going to own up to those things. And a lot of times that's hard, but sometimes, it's like, my wife, Judy, she'll call me out. It's like, Jody, you really overstepped there. You need to go talk to the kid. And so I'll go downstairs and knock on the door and end up having a 30-minute, sometimes a 5-minute discussion, because they don't want to talk to you. But sometimes those tender moments of just saying I'm sorry and putting each other in your arms, they really are foundationally so critically important to building that confidence and trust and that faith that they have a father that is always there for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that,
No, yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think that's one of the challenges that has been, especially adopting, is being the father that they hope that they would get, right? Because you have all of the other emotions that led to, having to be go to an adoptive family and stuff. So that's been an interesting dynamic that I probably should explore on another podcast. But, it's really made me cognizant of, how I'm acting as a father to build that relationship
Mm-hmm.
that will stand the long term. I always tell my kids, I'm like, who always comes back for you? I mean, when I go on a business trip, I go in and I hug the kids and I'm like, all right, who loves you and who always comes back?
Mm-hmm.
And my daughter, I often joke with her, like, yeah, even when I'm dead, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna haunt you. So so yeah.
Well, I never heard that you said you hope that with your adopted kids that you're the father that they hope they would have gotten, or that you said it in a way. I'm like, wow, I've never heard it put that way before. That you're the father they hope that they would have gotten.
Yeah. So it's a challenging thing, but you know what? It's been a great experience for me as a dad, as a man, to try to become that kind of father. And it's interesting because my wife, a couple weeks ago, I was probably not being the best version of myself, and she was actually calling me out on it. And she said, "It's like, what do you talk about on your podcast?" I'm like, I talk about the things that I'm trying to be better at. It doesn't mean I'm an authority at it. I'm still a work in progress,
Yes.
but she's really good at calling me my stuff.
Yeah, my wife as well. I think I have a couple of days every week where she's calling me out on something, and it's good. It's good to have a wife that in a relationship, when you're in a relationship where you can do that with each other.
Yeah.
And the same thing you're saying about talking to your kids and having those conversations is good. To know as a again, my son is only 2, so I haven't gone through these things yet. But having thinking about my relationship with my parents, like I always felt like I could go to them and talk to them about anything. And when they were, my dad and I, we had a couple of big fights in our lives. Like, I'm like, I think I'm in my early 20s, and you know how it is, man. Like, I want to do something, and my dad is sometimes funny about certain things. Like, he'll do things to kind of teach you a lesson. But the way he goes about it isn't always the best way. Like, I won't go too far into this story, but like, I just remember, like, I was moving out of a house. I was on campus. I was moving out of a house, and then my dad was like, I asked my dad, "Hey, I have all this stuff. Like, could you put it in storage?" Because he had like a storage, like a little storage space with whatever U-Haul or whatever, and he was like, "Sure, I can put it in storage for you." So I'm like, "Great, Dad." Like, so he puts the stuff up, and so it's there for a little while. So I'm moving into my new place. It was like probably some months later. I'm like, "Can I get my stuff out of storage?" And he was like, "Nope." And I'm like, "What do you mean, no?" He was like, "When you gave it to me to put it in storage, you gave up ownership of it." And so I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So like, I'm like 20 something, I can't remember, but he's like, so in this, he was trying to teach me a lesson, right? A lesson of, sometimes you need to be responsible for your own things. Just don't always rely on somebody else to do it for you, because but I'm like, okay, great, Dad, I get it, but can I have my stuff back? And he's like, so we get into this, I start, I was being disrespectful. I was like, I'm a grown man now, and and so we're arguing with each other. And then he says, all right, and my friend is there with me. My friend is like, I'm not getting into this. Like, and so he says, all right, you want your stuff? And he has a pickup truck. He's like, you want your stuff? All right, you can go get your stuff. You get it back. But if you can't fit like everything, if you can fit everything in this truck, if you can't fit in, you're walking back to your spot, which was like a ways away. So me and my friend and we go pack everything in carefully and try to leave some space for us in the truck. But I get my stuff back. But we didn't talk for like weeks after that, right? But I was just like, I get my dad will always do certain just silly. It was I learned a lesson though. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be cautious about what I ask for next time, and I'm gonna do the due diligence and see, okay, can I do this myself? And no, and I say that my dad would do anything for me and my sister, but it was certain lessons that he would try to teach us, and it just was like, okay, Dad, like, so, but it's funny to me now. I look back, but I could always go to them and talk to them about anything, and even if just stuff that was kind of traumatic that happened in my life, or like stuff that I did that was stupid, I could go to them and just say, hey, I did this, could you bail me out? Not a jail, but could you could you just bail me out of this situation, hear me out? But yeah, no, so that's important, man, to have that level of comfort and trust in your parents. And
Yeah, no, that's good. So let's talk kind of in wrap up. Let's talk about your boy Alexander. I mean,
yeah,
we've talked about him a little bit. 2 years old. How
yeah,
has your life changed having a 2-year-old?
drastically. um it's not my own anymore. Like, that's my wife and I always say, our life is not our own. Like, I mean, they demand all your time, but it's like, it's the weirdest thing, because, sometimes you just want to just kick back, watch a movie and relax and just not be bothered. But when you see this little guy, when when he just smiles and goes crazy, when he sees you in the morning, or you come through the door, and it's like, and he's talking, he speaks really well, he talks really well for two, so he's saying all these things, and he's saying, I love you, daddy, and he's just, I mean, it's like, oh man, all right. It's just amazing to see him grow up. Like, it's happens so fast. And I was fortunate enough, I was able to work from home. I worked from home for a while, for a couple of years, but I was able to be home for the first year for his first year, so we grew very close. Like, it was, weird at first. I was connected to him, but I didn't feel as connected, because you're a newborn, you're always with
Yeah.
mom, and I just didn't feel that connection with him. And then I would start getting him in the mornings, and my wife would sleep, and I would get him and bring him downstairs with me in the mornings, and I would sit there and have the TV on, and I would just have him there in my arms. I would just look at him and feed him, and he would just look up at me. And so we began to grow close just in those moments when he was an infant, and I could just bring him downstairs with me. And then, I mean, after a couple of months, he was chasing me around the house, and he's a daddy's boy. So
That's
I
awesome.
thought he was gonna be a mama's boy. You know, I was like, when I found out we were having a boy, I'm like, oh, it's over with. Like, he's gonna be a mama's boy, and he's a daddy's boy. So I'm enjoying it while it lasts, man, because you can switch at any moment.
Yes,
To,
it can. That's awesome.
yeah, it's a blessing, man.
Oh man, I'm super excited for you. So, considering what you've created in Sincerely Brenda, and also being a dad of 2-year-old, what are one or two things that you think are important from your perspective that we need to do as fathers?
Yeah. Um, that's a great question. Um, so I can answer it from where I am now. I think um, patience is big, because I can be an impatient person. And so sometimes your impatience can be mistaken as something else. Maybe you don't care, or yeah, you don't care. And so I'm learning how to be patient with my son, and understand, and to like realize, okay, he doesn't know what he's doing half the time, like, he's two, and so I have to be patient, and I can't. So that's the first thing, patience. And the second thing, I mean, I was guess communication. Sometimes as men, we don't talk or communicate effectively, and That's something that I am big on, is always trying to communicate and make sure people know where I'm coming from. And so as my son grows and gets bigger and older, and I just want to make sure he knows he can come to me and talk to me. He doesn't have to be afraid to talk to me. Um, that we can have an open line of communication.
Oh, that's good. Well, man, I just really appreciate you taking the time to visit with me this evening. And guys that are listening, I strongly, strongly encourage you to go watch his movie, Sincerely Brenda. I mean, it is really, really good. I like that you said at the beginning that it's kind of slow, because it is kind of slow and it builds up. But man, as it builds up, it gets you thinking, it gets you feeling. It really draws you into the character stories and just wondering how they're going to bridge the gap. And I think we as men, a lot of times we have relationships and we're like, how am I ever going to bridge the gap with this son or this daughter or this, somebody that I've been estranged to? And that journey can be a real tough one. And I just love the way you told the story. So guys, I invite you to go check it out. It's Sincerely Brenda. It's on Amazon Prime, and go watch it. It is phenomenal. So,
Oh, thank you. Thank you. If you don't mind me saying one more thing,
oh, please.
like, because you made me think of something there. I think sometimes as guys, like, we always want to fix something. Sometimes we got to fix it. We got to fix it. And I think the thing that Charles did, and I just thought about this as you said it, and I was reflecting on the film. He was just there. I mean, granted, they were there for, they were there for a weekend together for the mom's funeral, but he didn't for after a certain amount of times he tried to sit and say, hey, I'm doing better, I'm sober, but he just didn't force anything else. He was just there. And so I
Yeah.
think sometimes you just need to be there and listen and just be present and do it consistently, and then things begin to open up. And his boys needed him. When they needed him, he was there. He was
Just
there.
there listening. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I love the one other line that Charles actually says to his the friend. He says, I've been praying and God ain't listening. And she
Mm-hmm.
goes, he's listening, but all you're doing is talking.
Talking. Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow. I mean, that one hit me in the heart, because I was like, how many times am I just pouring my heart out to God and saying, please help me, please help me, please help me, please help me. And I'm not just stopping and being still
Mm-hmm.
so that I can receive the inspiration that he's been waiting to give me if I'll
Mm-hmm.
just shut the yap.
Just shut up the mouth. Just quiet yourself and be still. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was great. All right, man. Thank you so much, Kenneth. It's such a good time visiting with you, and I mean we've only known each other a week, and it's
Yeah.
amazing how a moment or two or three moments can really change a person's life and their perspective. And you've done that for me. So thank you for being part of my podcast and being open to the inspiration, because I know this movie was inspired for you and you listened, and God took you through that experience so that you could touch men and families' lives.
Thank you, Jody. I appreciate that. Thank you for having me on. And if there's anything you need from me, or, I would just reach out, man. Just reach out. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you very much. And the rest of you guys that are listening to the podcast, thank you so much for joining me every week. Remember, we drop new episodes every single Monday at 4 a.m. Please come join us, share us, like, subscribe. And I also want to extend a personal invitation to our private Facebook group called Father's Fire. And we talk about, fatherhood and what it means to be a man. And we try to do it in a setting that we can have an open dialogue where people can open up their hearts. They're not being judged, and we can really push ourselves to be the best men, the best husbands, and the best fathers possible. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll check you same time, same bat channel right here on Father's Fire.